I'd like you to take out your Bible and turn with me to Proverbs, and that is where we're going to be primarily, really exclusively this evening. Proverbs chapter 1 is where we begin this evening. The first line there is not going to be on the screen, and so you're going to have to listen closely. But I say that mostly, it's not going to be on the handout, but it is simply the word purpose. Purpose. That Proverbs chapter 1, verses 2 through 7, that will be our lengthier reading, as it is also, in a way, the introductory passage. That's one way of thinking about these verses from Proverbs chapter 1. That 2 through 7, if you had to pick a purpose passage or a thesis statement from the book of Proverbs, it would be Proverbs chapter 1, verses 2 through 7. Or at least, I don't want to be too dogmatic about it. That might contradict one of our reasons this evening, but at least it's one possible thesis passage. Makes sense that it opens the passage other than his introduction in verse 1. So let's read it together. He says, to know wisdom and instruction, to understand words of insight, to receive instruction in wise dealing, in righteousness, justice, and equity, to give prudence to the simple, knowledge and discretion to the youth. Let the wise hear and increase in learning, and the one who understands obtain guidance. To understand a proverb and a saying, the words of the wise and their riddles. And then usually there's a break there in the poetry, but I'd like you to include verse 7, which says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. And then it observes, on the other hand, that fools despise wisdom and instruction. And that's going to be your only outside passage, is to compare this passage and the last statement there with Psalm 14, verse 1. When you think about someone that is wise, they have this respect, this deep reverence for God. It starts and ends there. But the fools have no basis for really having wisdom. It doesn't mean that there aren't someone that might be labeled a fool that gets things right occasionally, but those who live without God, those who even try and say there is no God, they have no real basis for obtaining wisdom. Because true wisdom ultimately resides with and thus comes down to us from our Creator. And so if you deny God, it's almost, you might put it in our term, good luck living life with true wisdom. But that's what the proverb writer calls us to do, is to come and learn how to walk both with God and with people in wisdom. Our relationship with God, but a lot of the Proverbs deal more then with how that idea of God and our respect for Him, how that should regulate how we interact with other people. Trying to live in this way that is right and with integrity. It is about learning to identify with our God. It is, in the words of a friend of mine, living this way is what the gospel deserves. And I encourage you, as you read and you think through the Proverbs, to remember that everything that we have in what we call the Old Testament as a whole points us to the one who came as the wisdom, the embodiment of wisdom. His name you know as Jesus. But our intention this evening is to zero in on the question, why don't people like me? This is really where the preacher's tempted to have a show of hands. Like, how many of you think people don't like you or something? Okay, I wasn't going to ask for it. When you get volunteers, you got to love it. Okay, I like this guy. Okay, you can mark that down. But when you go through life, I don't know that it's possible to go through life and not have at least somebody that doesn't like you. Now, is it okay? Do we have to make sure everybody likes us? Shake or not? No. Go back to Jesus. Did everybody like Jesus? No. Some people hated Jesus so much they wanted him to die. That's one extreme, and that's not what we're going for this evening. We're not going for some kind of people-pleasing. You can't do that. You can't make everybody happy with you. You're going to wind up with somebody that doesn't like you. If you do everything right, like Jesus, somebody's not going to like it because of that, if nothing else. But we don't want to go to the other extreme where we just don't care, and we push people away, and we hurt people, and without even really trying to be kind and not hurt them. You ever heard someone say something like this? Well, they just don't like me. I don't know. I don't get it. I don't know why. I think they just don't like me just because they don't like me. That's rarely the case. I mean, there may be somebody out there that it's just some weird quirk that they just don't like you because they don't like you. But most of the time, there is some reason. Now, again, it may be because you're living right and they're not. There may be a legitimate good reason. But the reason we're bringing up this list this evening is because we don't want it to be, as God's people, we don't want people to not like us and they have a legitimate cause for not liking us. Now, we've already been making jokes about it and offhand comments about this sermon. I mean, I made one when I announced it this morning even. And in the interest of full disclosure, I'm stealing and borrowing and adapting this sermon idea. Okay? There's a man named Tommy Nelson who wrote a book about the 12 essential habits of spiritual life. In that book, he has a chapter where he lists 40 reasons why people don't like you. Now, we don't have 40 tonight, okay? I do have this. We're going to visit this list a few times over the next few months. We're not going to do it even back-to-back Sundays. That might be too much for some of us, okay? We don't have 40. If you looked at the handout, we just got 7, okay? But that's where this started, okay, several years ago. And then there's a preacher, some of you might have heard of him, David Shannon. He's kind of the outgoing president of Freed-Hardeman University. He's preached and been a university president. He's going back to local ministry. But he took those 40 reasons and then presented them in a couple of sermons. He did a couple of sermons. And then some others have taken that and preached. It's one of those sermons that people have preached, a lot of people have preached in some way. And so I say all that to say, that's where this started. This is Gantt's version, so to speak, of all of that. But Tommy Nelson included this as a part of what he called biblical success. And he made the observation that if any of these, in his list, any of these 40 dominate your life, you are guaranteed to never find, again, what he calls biblical success in life. And he boils that down. Biblical success is living like there is a God and it's not you. That's kind of his summary of 2 truths you put together. You live like that, that's what success is. But if any of these reasons are a big part of who you are, you likely won't end up living that way. Why don't some people not like us? Here we go. You ready? This is a love-hate sermon. Okay, because there's bound to be at least one of these that hurts us because we know it's something we struggle with. And we want to do better, right? As Christians, we want to change, we want to grow. We don't want people to not like, or we want people to like us, I should say, more positively. But it still hurts to face some of this. All right, here's reason number 1. People may not like you because you are a loner. Or no, I messed up. That's number 2, okay? In more full disclosure, that's the first one in the original list. Okay, I got it in my head. Okay, that's my excuse. You should add that to the list of reasons, people that like to make excuses for their mistakes. Okay, so you can already fill out number 2. There you go. The first one that I listed is, are you a bad listener? There's your key word, listener. I should have just hit the slide and read it, right? Are you a bad listener? So go with me to Proverbs chapter 18. And you might, if you've got a marker or something you like to use, you might mark Proverbs 18. If you looked at the handout, or as a heads up, several of these are from Proverbs 18. We've got a couple from Proverbs 12, and then they're kind of scattered from there. But Proverbs 18, verse 13. Look at what it says about listening. Proverbs 18, verse 13 says, if one gives an answer before he hears, It is his folly and shame. You ever seen this? It might be that you're watching two other people in conversation. Now you got to be careful because there's one on the list that might apply here. But for the sake of our consideration here, you're watching these two people have a conversation, and it's not a real conversation. There's not a lot of mutual conversing. One person may be speaking at the moment, but you can tell sometimes even by their demeanor, their gesture, their posture, that the other person isn't really listening. They're just waiting for their turn. And they may not wait until they're really done. They may wait until they pause long enough, or they may even interrupt them directly or start talking over them. And you can almost see them chomping at the bits, not in the angry way, but in the sense they're just waiting on bated breath. They're just ready. They're almost, they're almost in a different place. They're having their conversation with themselves. Okay, you seen that? Now this is where you got to say, have you been that? Right? And I think we've all done that, haven't we? At least once or twice in our lives, where we realize, I'm not even hearing this person. I'm just waiting so they can hear me talk. Some of us really like to hear ourselves talk, don't we? And you think, well, Gantt, you became a preacher, so. But there's something about really, truly listening to people that has a draw, but then, and most of these go that way, don't they? You flip it when you're a bad listener, and people start to catch on to that, well, they're not likely to like it. They may not like you. And so here's a suggestion. Think about it as a two-step process with a halfway point. Step 1.0 is to just listen to the other person. I mean, this becomes even more important if it's a very serious topic. Maybe you're discussing biblical matters with someone. You're in a Bible study or just a spiritual conversation or something that is really important. I'm not saying you shouldn't listen otherwise, but there are times when I need to really know, where's this person coming from? I'm not just here to say, here's what I see in the Bible. This is the way it is. Where does this person really stand? How did they get here in life? Step one is just listen for real. And then I'm going to say 1.5 is to make sure you do understand. You can call it comprehension if you want a bigger word than just understand. Listen to comprehend. 1.5. And then you can figure out step 2. Then it's okay. We're not saying it's wrong for you to say something too. That's when you respond. And you may respond in a counter way. You may respond in agreement, whatever. That's on you. But if you're a bad listener, or you have a bad habit of interrupting people, people aren't going to like you. Okay, what was number 2? Are you a loner? Now remember, these are proverbs. They're principles. Most of what we're saying even this evening from the Proverbs has a need for balance. You could probably write some pretty lengthy disclaimers and clarifications. I'm not going to do a whole lot of that because it might get too distracting, but you've got to keep some of this in perspective. When we say being a loner can make people not like you, we're not talking about someone who's an introvert per se. It isn't about where you get your energy. Do you get it from being around people, or do you get it from being alone and in the quiet? This doesn't mean that it's wrong to take some time and maybe even say to other people, hey, I need a moment. I need some space. This is more about an overall attitude of being withdrawn, of chasing a lack of responsibility. I don't want people to have to depend on me. I don't want to have the uncomfortableness of getting close to someone. And sometimes friendships are that way. Of course, marriage is supposed to be that way. So stay in this chapter, Proverbs 18, verse 1. And I lost a page. But in Proverbs 18, verse 1, he says, whoever isolates himself seeks his own desire. Think about how that applies to that chasing the freedom of no responsibilities. And then he says this, he breaks out against all sound judgment. Or sometimes it's translated with the word rages, that he rages against what's healthy. someone who seeks to just be alone and avoid responsibility. You think about our culture. Now, there's more to this, and not all of this is even a right or a wrong matter. But think about how people are staying single longer. They're staying at home longer. Could it be that part of why people aren't getting married near as much as they used to, aren't having kids, even if they do get in a committed relationship, they're even saying, I don't want to have kids. Could it be that part of it is because of this attitude? If I do that, that means I've got responsibilities. Now, of course, some people do all that, and they still don't step up to the plate. They still back off and do their own thing, as we say. Here's a summary. That solitude is a gift. You think about Jesus himself. There are plenty of times in the Gospels where he withdrew, either by himself, he'd spend all night by himself in prayer. Of course, he'd get up the next day and go back to the crowds and heal and teach. There's balance. Or he would pull away with just the apostles, or even the inner three for a time. Solitude is a gift, but isolation is a problem. Some of the worst things people do to themselves is because they get too isolated. And sometimes that's out of more directly their choice. Sometimes it is kind of how things end up in life, and they aren't able to guard from that. There's some more to this, as we said. This could be a whole discussion. This is just number 2. Here's number 3. It's a big one. Do you like to give unsolicited advice? This is the attitude that is that know-it-all attitude. It might be in a friend group where there is one person that it doesn't matter what the topic of conversation is, what the issue is, they always have what? They always have an opinion. They've always got something to say. And it does not matter here if their opinion is educated and wise or not. That's not the point here at all. I mean, you might be someone who knows a lot about a lot of things, for real. That doesn't mean you have to always say it, does it? Flip over to Proverbs chapter 12. Look at verse 23. Proverbs 12, verse 23. He writes this about knowledge. Proverbs 12:23, a prudent man conceals knowledge, but the heart of fools proclaims folly. You don't have to share everything. Even if it is something you know, hey, I've got some experience. I've got some knowledge here. One of the most enjoyable things in life is when you're not someone who has to always express their opinion and give their advice on everything and make sure everybody knows how you stand on every issue. One of the best things in life is when you're not that way, and then somebody comes and asks for your advice. And they will. You get some experience. You show yourself that you know what you're doing in certain areas of life. It might be a career. It might be scriptures. Who knows? And people will come to you, usually privately, and ask for your opinion. What did we say? Everybody's got one. Right? Everybody's got an opinion. That doesn't mean everybody has to share their opinion every time. And you might keep in mind Proverbs 18, verse 2, if it's still marked. It says, a fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only, do you see how this connects with the listener part? But only in expressing his opinion. It's an attitude where it's about me and what I know. And you might think of it, I mentioned this a minute ago, do the people that know you in your life, generally speaking, okay, I mean, if it's your spouse, that's a little different, but a little mystery never hurts a marriage. But do most of the people that know you know everything about you as far as every position, every opinion you have, politics, whatever it is? I mean, I'm not saying that's an outright bad thing, okay? But it at least lends toward this idea of, I got to make sure everybody knows what I think about everything. And we tend as humans to assume that if we think it's worth hearing and valuable to other people. May not be the case. So, number 3, unsolicited advice. Do you like to give it out? Now, right there with that. Several of these overlap, and that's partly intentional. Are you someone who likes to argue? Are you argumentative? And this one is one part attitude, where they have an argumentative demeanor in how they even go about discussing problems and issues. It's also people that want to discuss and make a big deal out of anything and everything. If you look at Proverbs 17, go back a chapter to verse 14. It says, the beginning of strife is like letting out water. So quit before the quarrel breaks out. I mean, we've had our recent sobering events in our country, still have some ongoing with water and high water and flood. Let's just stop it before it starts. Be careful about how things can easily become a quarrel by being argumentative. Now, I'll let somebody else look up Proverbs 21, verse 9, and one or the other can read it to their spouse, I guess. Y'all figure that out, okay? But do you know anybody that just likes to argue? I had a couple of uncles that supposedly, I was told, they would argue just going down the road. It didn't matter. They would pick out a street sign, a business, and they would argue about colors. It kind of reminds me of the social media trend that went around for a while about what color is this dress. Any of y'all saw that? Any of you see that? Okay, go look it up if you're curious. I saw someone just recently arguing about whether Sayre, Oklahoma, okay, it's nobody in this room, so you're off the hook there. But they were arguing about it with someone, is Sayre southwest Oklahoma or is it central western Oklahoma? And for them, this was a big deal. Now, this was on social media, and social media is, it gives everybody a platform for their opinion, number 3, and it really feeds arguments. You want an argument, there's somebody that'll argue with you on the internet, right? But they got hot. You could tell by their lengthy comment after comment saying, it's not southwest Oklahoma. You probably think Oklahoma City is southwest then because it's a little south and west of the center of the state. And then they block the person over it. Some people just want to argue. We said this is partly about what you make a big deal. And so I jotted down these 2 observations from this list or this number on the list. One is to pick your battle. And this is, as you look at Scripture and in my personal observation, and that's not a lot, okay? But in my life, I don't know, it's difficult to pick something as far as relating to people that is more important than learning this lesson, that you don't have to die on every hill. Not everything is worth making an issue out of it or standing your ground over it. Sometimes it's better just to back off. And whether that means you have to compromise something, someone who was listing these lists talked about when you have your family get-togethers and how some people say, no, we celebrate Christmas on the 25th at this time, be there, or we won't see you. We get into these situations where we won't bend, we won't budge. Pick your battles because not every hill is worth dying on. Are you someone who's argumentative? Now, next, I think it's number 5. Are you someone who likes to meddle? Or are you a meddler? Look at Proverbs chapter 26. We'll go a little deeper into the book. Verse 17. You know what another way of saying this is, don't you? Mind your own what? Business. Proverbs 26, verse 17 says it. Whoever meddles, here specifically in a quarrel not his own, is like one who takes a passing dog by the ears. How many of you want to sign up for that one? Just to reach out and grab a dog by the ears. It's not going to end well for one of you, maybe both of you. Isn't that true in this case, though, with human interactions? When you insert yourself into a situation, it's almost like what we were saying earlier about expressing your opinion, but a little more here. It's a little bit more specific about the way I see other people and their problems. It sometimes stays with gossip, but sometimes it goes more. We really have to get involved. We have to fix things, fix other people in their problems. Now, it's one thing if somebody says, hey, we're at odds. Can you be a third party and mediate? Okay, that's one thing. But sometimes we almost, now I'm sure somebody has done this actually. I'm thinking more as a metaphor, but we almost show up on their doorstep and say, hello. And they go, okay, what are you here for? And I'm here to fix your problem. I'm here to settle the differences between you and so. Of course, sometimes they go, I didn't know so. We had an issue. Well, you do now, right? And some people are upfront about it. I mean, I've heard people say this. I make it my business. Others are more subtle about it. They want you to know how kind and caring they are. I'm just concerned about you. That's why I'm stepping in the middle. Or I feel like I need to be involved. Are you someone that likes to meddle? It's one thing to stir the pot. It's another even to stir somebody else's, isn't it? That's number 5. Now, a couple more to go for the evening. Number 6, as you think about reasons why people may not like you, are you someone who engages in verbal dominance? Verbal dominance. This is where we tell people how we think, how we feel, and we don't hold back. This is where we say, I'm going to give them a piece of my mind. I'm going to tell them how I feel about them, and if it hurts them, okay. Now here we go back to Proverbs chapter 12. We'll go back to Proverbs 12, verse 18, and read this proverb with me. Proverbs 12, verse 18. He says, there is one whose rash words are like sword thrust, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. You get both sides of this one. Got a mixture of negative and positive. Now, I don't know that I know anybody that's ever been stabbed with a sword. I do know some people that have been stabbed with knives, sometimes self-inflicted. I won't name names. But this is about a wound, isn't it? We were singing about it earlier, angry words. They're not always angry words. Sometimes they're said rather calmly and sweetly. And they cut deep. And a wound like that, even if it does heal, even if it's not a mortal sword injury, and you move on and you heal, let's say in a relationship, you go to them and you're able to mend things, the damage is still done and things will never be the same again. A scar, at least, will be there for a while, maybe permanently. We ever do that? We ever cut people? Cut them down? To borrow another phrase, do we ever cut their legs off? And sometimes they barely even a conversation is barely started and we've already cut them to pieces by our words. It's been a while now, and yes, what I said earlier, the scars have mostly gone, but I've never been stabbed with a sword, but I was impaled in the wrist area here by some framing nails years ago. And there's still a couple of scars. And this was, well, a little over 2 decades ago now. Or go right at 2 decades. And as I was reading that proverb about the sword thrust, I thought about just those nails. Again, thankfully yet, I've never had anybody take a sword to me. But I thought about those nails. And there's a couple of still scars that are there. Isn't that what we sometimes do when we hurt people? And this is something, you'll notice this as you study the Proverbs as a whole, there is a lot about what we do with our words. Words are this power to either heal or hurt, even in this passage in Proverbs 12. And so that's why I'm calling it verbal dominance. A more modern phrase might be even, you could include the idea of verbal abuse. Sometimes some of the worst things we ever do to people, we do without ever touching them except with our sound waves. As you think about why people don't like you. Here's number 7 for the evening. And this one's a combo, I guess. Are you someone who is offensive and also explosive? Offensive and explosive. This one almost ties several of these together. This is an attitude that I don't care if I hurt their feelings. if I'm inappropriate, if I go too far, even when I'm teasing, that's their problem, we say. Or this is when anger causes us to explode. You ever notice that God is slow to anger and quick to mercy, to get over his anger? We as humans tend to have one or the other. We either fly off the handle really easily and then we might get over it, we're done, or we build and build and build, and then it takes us forever, maybe never, to get over it. Are you offensive or explosive? Go back one more time to Proverbs 18, verse 19. He says, a brother offended is more unyielding than a strong city. And quarreling is like the bars of a castle. What's it like when you offend someone? When you really hurt them? Burned bridges are really difficult to repair. And we can apologize, and this goes back to that sword wound one and the previous one. We can say, I'm sorry, will you forgive me? Apologies can help mend the relationship, but they never unsay or undo what we did, either in our careless offensiveness or in our explosive anger. And we even say, I didn't mean it. I was just mad. I got mad. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say that. I didn't mean to do that. But then you think, well, is that really even true? In that moment, didn't you mean it? And couldn't it be that your anger or whatever it was, the emotions that took over, simply allowed you to let it out? Look at Proverbs 15:18, and then the lesson will be yours. Proverbs 15, verse 18. This is the more explosive side of this one. He says, a hot-tempered man stirs up strife, but he who is slow to anger quiets contention. Why don't people like you? It might be because you're offensive and explosive. And you can now say this about all of these. Walk carefully through life. But that doesn't mean we walk on eggshells. Our culture has taken this one and it's gone awry with that one. Balance says, I'm going to be careful. I don't want to hurt you. But I'm also not going to just walk on eggshells and always be worried about who's going to take me the wrong way or who's going to be offended. And that is no less true than when it comes to the gospel. The gospel is offensive by its nature. So if you're going to share it, people may be offended. That doesn't mean you have to share it in a way that is intentionally offensive. Think about that. Let's close with this thought this evening. The book of Proverbs directs us to wise living, but even more to wise relating to other people. This week, let's start over. Let's go back to our first relationship, and that's with God. Jesus says the first commandment is to love God. I think about it as love God, humbling myself under Him, and then I turn and love people, trying to help them, not hurt them. So perhaps this evening, pick one of these 7 that may stand out a bit. They may hurt a bit more than some of the others. Pray about it. Think about it this week. And then instead of just try to do better, seek God's help in growing to be less like someone people don't like. This song is the song of encouragement for a reason. It's the song where God's people hold out their hands for God Himself, God through them, inviting us all, calling us all to come and give everything, lay it all at His feet. Our worries, our problems, our issues, our struggles with people, problems, and people. This week, let's be people who keep the cross ever before us as we live for Jesus and love people and learn to get along with them. Let's stand and sing together.